Good evening, Gills fans. Welcome back to the latest episode of Gills in the Blood TV. It's somewhat take two in terms of match previews returning. We did try one last week before the game against Fleetwood that ultimately fell foul of the weather. So we will try again this week as we host high-flying Doncaster Rovers. And I'm pleased to say, making his long-awaited second appearance on the channel is Rovers fan Daniel Nice. You can find him on X, nice and easy, at Daniel_Nice7. I'll put his details, as always, in the description at the bottom of this video. So go and give him a follow for all a Rovers perspective before, during and after the game. Daniel, first of all, welcome back to the channel. Happy New Year and hope you're very well.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me back on.
No, pleasure. Like we've just said before we press record, it's been a couple of years since. And I want to ask about what is a very different Doncaster Rovers now, but just have a quick look at recent form before we do that. Gills and Doncaster, weirdly, both have 7 points from the last 18 available in the league. It both comes in the way of 2 wins, a draw and 3 defeats. So a bit patchy from both sides at the moment. I'm not sure who's in better form. Gills 7 all came in a big clump, and then it's been 3 defeats to 0 since then before a couple of postponements. Rovers defeats against Wimbledon, Walsall and Port Vale most recently. Wins against Tranmere and Fleetwood, and the draw came against Colchester United. So yeah, a bit up and down from both teams. Gills are currently 14th in League Two with 30 points from 23. Doncaster do occupy the last playoff space with 40 points from their 25 fixtures so far. Yeah, like we just alluded to, Daniel, it's a very different Doncaster Rovers that we're going to be talking about this evening compared to the last time you came on the channel, which was the spring of 2023. You're coming off the back of a very impressive win in the FA Cup this past weekend, regardless of the patchy form. I don't take too much notice of cup games, but being your last game, it's obviously something that does need to be looked at. Taking championship whole all the way to penalties and then coming out on top in the shootout by 5 goals to 4, I believe. But obviously that was as impressive as it can be. It's always good beating a team 2 divisions above, which is great, gets you into the next round. But just how different is Doncaster Rovers compared to the last time that we spoke a couple of years ago?
I think it's absolutely chalk and cheese, to be fair. I think that was the last sort of run of games for Danny Schofield at that time, and we were on a sort of a losing sort of streak, and certainly I think we didn't win towards the end of that season. We had something like 1 win out of 11 games, and at the end of that season we'd lost exactly half of the games. So I think we'd been relegated, having lost the best part of 30 games from League One. Then we lost half of our games. But even the first half of last season, we were struggling to a point. I think we'd lost something like 16 out of the first 28 until that 18-game league table that Grant McCann sort of spoke about. And he talked about then about being top of that table. And I think, I wouldn't say everyone was laughing at it, but I mean, the thought of being top of the bottom 6 at that point would have done, because we were 3rd from bottom and looked like we had a bit of a relegation battle in front of us. But to be fair, we did top that 18 games. We started this season really well, and then, like you said, we've been a little bit hit and miss recently. But you mentioned the teams we've lost to, and it's been Wimbledon who've been one of the form teams. It's Walsall who have been the best team, and even Port Vale. I know they've been a bit iffy recently, but I think on paper they've arguably got the best squad in the division. Again, it was a tight game. We probably were the better team overall. And then, like you say, we also drew at Colchester. They've had a couple of iffy results recently, but I think they were unbeaten in 10 when we went there. So I think if we're guilty of any...
They draw loads of games full stop, don't they? I think, Cole, you.
That's it, yeah. And I think if I'm being critical, I'd say we've probably not been able to kick on. Like, we've had a win and then we haven't been able to back that up. I think we haven't done that since right at the start when we'd won 4 out of 5. I think that sort of culminated with the win against Gillingham, actually. But having said that, we haven't lost back-to-back either. So probably the long and short of it is we feel we've perhaps drawn too many. But then recently we have lost games which, like I say, had we managed to get results against Wimbledon and Port Vale, we'd be, second and probably clearing second. So I think, like you say, if you look at the table at the minute, we're seventh, but we're one win off second. We're perhaps one defeat off mid-table, if you like. But I think whichever way you look at it, if you win 2 or 3 in a row, which is the one thing that's eluded us, we'll be in that top 3 again, because I don't think anyone is managing to do it. So I think there's been a bit of criticism recently, but that's a little bit harsh, given we have lost. You know, it's not like we've lost to Morecambe, Harrogate and Accrington, for example. You know, we've lost to, I'm not saying, you know, well, Walsall are the best team, aren't they? And that's clear. And, you know, Wimbledon and Port Vale are probably 2 of the, I hate to use the word best, because like, how do you define best teams? But, you know, they're there or thereabouts as well. So it's not really the end of the world.
That's it. Like you say, if it was teams that were out of form and down the bottom, then you'd be a bit more concerned. And it's only the odd goal in 2 of them games as well, all right, Walsall, but they have been the standout. They're the only team that seems to have found any modicum of real consistency all season, and that's why they're, well, a way off into the distance at the moment. It seems similar to like the Premier League, where if you look at like this evening's, we're recording on a Wednesday, so Tuesday's fixtures when this comes out live, just to confuse everyone. If Liverpool beat Nottingham Forest at the City Ground, then they'll be off and into the distance as well. And you'd say that it's hard for teams to reel them in, like it might be hard for teams to reel Walsall in. So yeah, it's there's certainly sort of circumstances surrounding the defeats, and it's not a disaster, like you say. Similar to us, like we're 14th, but 3 wins and suddenly you're back in the playoff mix. But like you mentioned, you're probably a couple of defeats away, certainly from your position, to going back into mid-table, such as the open nature of the division this season. Daniel, you alluded to the sort of the first half and the second half of 23-24 being the very example of a season of 2 halves, to use a cliche. Looking back to sort of this time last year, from an outsider's perspective, it looked like it was 3 signings that made just a monumental difference to the whole sort of complexion of your campaign. And I'm talking about Tala, if I've pronounced that correctly, in goal. You got in, was it Matty Craig, I think, from Tottenham, and obviously another former Gills loanee was Hakeem Adelakun, who turned into prime Ronaldo for half a season with you, having looked like, I don't know, not prime Ronaldo when he was with us. His best game for us was playing at right back after we'd had someone sent off, unfortunately. So, like I say, it felt like 3 signings made a huge difference last season. And then we all know what momentum does. And I think there was a period you won 10 or 11 in a row, which was absolutely ridiculous at any level. But am I right in saying that this season, the squad just looks better balanced all over from the get-go in terms of experience, players that you've got in loan, youngsters with ability, people that are playing at their best now, and I'm talking about Luke Molyneux. You're actually getting the Luke Molyneux you thought you'd signed a couple of seasons ago on a consistent basis. How do you feel the squad's differ compared to last season? Because it is this time where you went on that ridiculous run from, or slightly afterwards, and you're in a much better position as a starting point now, aren't you, over the final sort of half of the season?
Yeah, I think the squad definitely looks in a better place. Like you say, those 3 signings did make a massive difference. And I think in the first half of last season, we had so many injuries. So it's a bit of a combination. We've got people like Richard Wood back in defence. Like you said, the signings triggered it. But for example, having Adelakun playing from the left, that seemed to unlock Molyneux. And it was like, for the first half of last season, if you stop Molyneux, that was half the battle. I think then Delican had a few games where he almost scored or assisted in every game. Then everyone started to double up on him, and then Molyneux got a bit more freedom down the right-hand side. Harrison Biggins played as the number 10, which I think was more accidental. He came on in a game and just looked really good there. So I think it's fair to say there's a few things by design, but a few things just seem to fall into place. And like you say, momentum is a big thing, but I think the biggest difference is there probably wasn't any expectation there. And, you know, I remember we got to, I think we beat Wrexham and it was about the 5th or 6th win in a row. And after that game, it was like the headline was, we'd won, I think it was 5 or 6, I can't remember exactly. No, I wasn't even looking at it like that. It almost felt at that point like we were just about getting enough points to make sure we definitely weren't going down. Then it's like 6 in a row, 7 in a row. And suddenly, like I said, the more you think about it, the more it became a possibility. But then we've started this season. I can see why some have been a bit frustrated, because Grant McCann himself said at the outset, we want to win the league. I wouldn't say that's been misinterpreted, because when you say you want to win the league and fans interpret that as we want to win the league, that is exactly what he said. But I think it's almost been taken too literally, in the sense that, that's the aim, but there's, 23 other teams trying to do the same thing. And actually, it's been a very even division. And, he said something quite telling, I think, just before we went to Walsall, and that was, if we were in Walsall's position, sort of 10 points clear, he'd want to be 15 points clear. If we were 15 points clear, he'd probably think we should have won even more. I think it's just the sort of mindset he has. But probably looking back, it might have been better to just say, look, we're starting again. We missed out in the playoffs. It sometimes takes a little bit of time to recover from that, which it actually didn't. So again, that raised expectation even more. I thought we might actually start the season slowly, but because we hit the ground running, since then, the form's been relatively consistent, but it hasn't been at the highest levels that we've all, I say all, but many have sort of hoped for or expected. So I think in a way we possibly put a bit of a target on our own back. We haven't been able to quite live up to that. I think we saw on Sunday, when we played a team that were good in possession, we were able to defend, get hold of the ball at times, play on the counter attack. That really suits the team we've got. But obviously you don't get that in League Two, because I think virtually every team that's come, even Port Vale, just camp on their own edge of their own box and try and do what we did to Hull. So we've not had that ability to really unlock tight defences. But I've watched a lot of League Two this season with a new TV deal, and Walsall aside, I don't think anyone's actually impressed me that much in that regard. I think, I watched Walsall on Saturday and they tore into Tranmere, but not many teams I've watched have really tore into an opposition consistently. So I think we're very similar to a lot of other teams, but like you say, we've actually got a good platform now to build on, whereas this time last year, we were looking over our shoulders and the form came from nowhere. So in theory, we're well placed to have a good crack at, getting ideally in the top three, but if not, the top seven at least. I think it's well within our reach.
That's it. And like you say, it's Walsall away and gone a little bit at the moment, but there's another 2 automatic places as well. So it's not like you're just fighting for one automatic space like you have to do in League One and the Championship. There's that extra position which gets you up automatic. And obviously, I'm assuming you'd like to go up purely because you got stung in the playoffs last season. And we all know it's a bit of a lottery once you get to that stage. I was just looking at, obviously we've spoken about the balance and that type of thing. It's generally attacking players that grab the headlines. So if you go to any team in the Premier League, abroad, national teams, League Two, wherever, it's the goal scorers, those that are, exciting to watch, that get the headlines from fans and the praise and the awards and that type of thing. But given that you've got such a balanced squad, who would you pick out as maybe a couple of key players that would maybe go under the radar a little bit? Because we all know how good Billy Sharp's been dropping back into League Two and coming back to Doncaster Rovers. We know how good Luke Molyneux's been this season and others. But who would you say, maybe if you had to pick a couple that people might not have noticed that much, that have been instrumental in this solid first half of the season for yourselves?
Yeah, probably our 2 centre backs actually. Although our defensive record hasn't been great in terms of clean sheets, I think that's probably one area we have struggled in. Like, obviously, I've seen teams like Wimbledon have just done well because they don't concede many goals, and I'm sure there's more to it than that. But when you watch them, you think actually keeping the ball out of the net is kind of what they're based on, and they've got a goal scoring forward as well. But yeah, Jay McGrath's been an absolute revelation. He's actually born in Doncaster, and his dad played for us years ago, and that's probably where the connection came from, but he wasn't in the 18 towards the end of last year. We had Anderson and Wood who sort of played virtually every game, and then Joe Olowu, who is another one I'll come on to, but he was like the reserve centre back almost. McGrath couldn't get in the 18. I think it's fair to say now he'd be first name on the team sheet. He's big, strong. He's got that cliched sort of cultured left foot, particularly for a centre back. I mean, he could play probably further forwards. If you needed to play him in midfield, I'm sure he could play with his ability on the ball. And he actually gets quite a lot of our attacks started, particularly if we play back three. He plays on the left side. He's happy to bring the ball out. He plays those little sort of clippy diagonal balls over the top, which have been quite useful. But he's just become a real fan's favourite as well. I think on Sunday he was sort of stirring up the crowd sort of before, during and after, even just bore the penalty shootout. I think the only surprise was he didn't actually take one. I think he'd probably been next on the list. But yeah, he's been great. And then Oliver alongside him has been a real sort of man mountain. He's really sort of come of age. He's been with us a little while. I think Richie Wellens actually signed him when we were struggling in League One, and he's just ticked off a few milestones recently, and you realise he's actually played quite a lot of games now. One of our probably more senior players, but I think he only recently turned 25. And
that's
he was
literally
released
what I was
by
just looking at. Yeah, it's a young centre back pairing, isn't it? When you think of good centre backs, you think like they come into their prime at 29, 30, 31, whereas this 25 and 21. So it's great that they're doing well now, but ultimately, if you can get promoted, hopefully they'll be there for another season or two as well.
Yeah, and I think Olaru, he sort of feels a young 25 because he didn't play any football at Arsenal, any senior football anyway. And I think we were the first club where he'd had a sort of run of games. But yeah, they both emerged as, I think Owen Bailey's had the armband with Richard Wood not playing. But there's been a lot of talk of Wood maybe returning. I mean, I don't see how he gets in front of those two. And I think, McCann said towards the end of last year that McGrath was, even in that team that won every week and we kept a lot of clean sheets, was saying, I'm better than the two you're picking. And I quite like that confidence. I think at the time we'd have all said, I think his last game, we lost 5-1 at home to Stockport, who absolutely ripped us to bits that day. But obviously they were the standout team last year. But to have that sort of confidence and feel like he should be still playing, and even when he wasn't in the 18, he's obviously really sort of got the right attitude and mentality as well, because he could have gone sulking, and he might even have looked to try and leave if he thought he wasn't in the first team this season. Obviously Wood and Anderson played them, but there was an early injury to Wood and that sort of paved the way. So yeah, those two have been the standout. But I think we are young throughout the team, midfield as well. We've had some young loanees, but Owen Bailey again has played, I was going to say every minute. I think he came off at Hull with about 2 minutes of extra time to go. I mean, he's gone from not playing a game for 2 years because of injury to literally he played every single game last season. And I think he's missed the odd game in the it's not the Bristol Street, is it now?
He's averaged 90 minutes per game in League Two, looking at the app that I use. So yeah, he's not missed a minute in the league, which is the bread and butter for all of us, isn't it? At the end of the day, the cup competitions are generally bonuses or hindrances in the case of the Bristol Street Motors Trophy or whatever it's now called as well. But yeah, phenomenal to be playing every single minute of every league fixture over 25 games.
So yeah, he's and I think the challenge has been with Matty Craig obviously going back. I think when Craig was here, sort of Bailey either played alongside him and Biggins played further forwards, or Bailey was sort of released to play as sort of a higher 8. And he's almost, when he's played in that 8, he's, he did that twice against Fleetwood and scored in both games. So I think McCann sees him more, even though I think his qualities are more defensive, and he's played in the back three at times. He's played at right back. He has got that sort of knack of being in the right place and sort of creating things as well. But when he's done that, we haven't quite had the right balance to the team. I think George Broadbent is someone else I'd pick out who I've quite liked this season. He gets a bit of stick at times. He's very young as well, but we haven't got that natural sort of sitter, if you like. I think Broadbent and Bailey together have played quite well, but then if you do that, sometimes like at home, you don't need two sitters when everyone's behind the ball. So we just haven't quite had that. I mean, Craig was just sort of exceptional for us because, you know, he'd always take the ball, but he'd also, you know, the first couple of games, he got bullied a little bit. I mean, I think at Salford, he was getting some stick and he absolutely clattered someone. He had someone round the neck in the dugout. And I remember thinking that night, he's in the space of 3 games, he's gone from looking someone who looked like he wouldn't say boo to a goose to absolutely grabbing it by the scruff of the neck. And
Literally.
yeah, literally in their dugout. It was quite a feisty game, that one. But I just remember thinking he's really come of age already. And I think
Is he due to join someone higher up the pyramid now? Did I read on social media?
yeah, he's gone to Mansfield.
That was it.
I think we were trying to get him back, but once a top end sort of League One club came in, I think there was no chance. But yeah, there's rumours we're trying to bring in another midfielder, but it's probably just that balance in there. If Ben Close has played, he's quite again he's more of a playmaker, but I think he's had injury problems. So I think ultimately we go back to Bailey, and it's been sort of Olerud, McGrath, Bailey in front. I think that's a good 3, but we haven't then quite been as what's the word, sort of productive from that. I think last year towards the end, the ball was going into midfield and everything was going through the midfield, whereas this year we feel like we've been a bit more sort of robust in there, and the dangers either come from the fullbacks, McGrath playing it over the top or sort of winning those second balls in midfield. It hasn't been as creative. So yeah, but like you say, you go through those players and they're all very young. So I think, I know promotion's the aim, but the longer term future, like you said, when I was on 2 years ago, I'm thinking we just looked like we were slipping towards a relegation battle towards the National League, which, would have been unthinkable at the time. So I think whichever way we look at it, the last 12 months, we've now got a good, young looking squad, a good manager, like being in the 4th round of the FA Cup. I mean, we're the only team outside of League One in that, that's, and I know obviously we're not going to win it, but, the money that's generated, the positivity on Sunday, we celebrated.
Draw as well, didn't you? You got Premier League. Was it Palace?
Yeah, Palace at home. But even we've had some penalty sort of heartbreak in the last 2 times we've been in the playoffs. So just to win a penalty shootout felt like quite a big thing on Sunday, and like we reacted as if we've got promotion in a way, which I think the actual attitude, the mentality of the squad. There's people at the minute that couldn't get into the 20 on, with 9 subs, we still had spare bodies. And a couple of them were celebrating at the end, like they'd scored the winning penalty. So I think McCann's somehow managed to keep people happy, even the ones not involved. And that can only augur well that, we've had like a 3rd choice left back at times who's come back into our team and played well at centre back. So, like you said, we've got a big squad at times can be a hindrance in trying to get consistency. But again, I think he's built the squad for course and distance, and we should hopefully in this sort of second half of the season see, the sort of fruits of that. And also, anyone who has doubted McCann, I mean, if last season wasn't a lesson, I mean, we were fairly ordinary for, even up to about 30 games. I think it was that Salford game where we started to turn it. That was game 31. So, anything, I'm not saying we're going to win 10 or 11 in a row. But if that taught us anything, it would be to judge it over 46 games rather than, like we could win on Saturday and be second, we could lose and be 10th, but I think we'll be there or thereabouts over 46 games. And I think that's probably what people, forget when they sort of judge it week by week.
Well, see, yeah, if you've won 11 of your first 25, so you've got 21 left, even if you win 8 or 9 of them, you're going to be close to that 70-point mark just on wins, aren't you? So it's going to have you in and around the playoff places. And if you can go on any type of run, then yeah, you're definitely going to be there or thereabouts. Just one concern, not for me, for you, heading into Saturday potentially, is the recent away form. It's only 1 win in 5 on the road. I think I worked out correctly, and that was against Fleetwood 4-2 recently. And yeah, just 5 points collected from 15 available. Is that a bit of an issue at the moment, or is it just a case of it's one of them rough trots that every team has throughout a campaign?
I think it's, probably more to do with the fixtures we've had, I think. Because I think after the Fleetwood game, if I'm right, I think we'd won 7 and drawn 2 out of 9 in all competitions away. So at that point, we were struggling a little bit at home. And then typically we had a couple of good home wins. And then the away forms just dipped a bit.
Off as well, yeah.
It's felt a bit like one of them seasons where we haven't quite found all the answers, and probably where we've been good away. It's fair to say Walsall and Wimbledon pretty much played like the away team against us. And then at home, when Tranmere and Fleetwood were a little bit more open, and we beat them at home. So it's almost been, I think even in this little room, like I said, we drew at Colchester. We ended with 10 men in that. We drew at Hull on Sunday. I think, like I said, the stats all the way through. There's been times like where we've say won 1 in 8, but we win the next game and then we've only lost 1 in 8. So we've had quite a lot of draws, like a lot of the division. And I think each game we go into, I just feel like we've got a chance of winning. But equally, the division being the way it is, if you're not quite on it, I mean, people have sort of criticised League Two as not being that good this season, but I think the quality is probably not there. But I think every game is potential to win or lose, and whether you've won one week, the next game starts at 0-0, and it's another battle. It's the team that wins the most headers, the second balls, the battles, the scraps all over the pitch. Whoever gets the first goal seems to have a massive advantage. And then if you get through that game, the next game's exactly the same. So, I just kind of look at it that each game we go into, we've got a decent chance of winning. But equally, if we're not on it, every team, we went to Carlisle and, the general consensus was, 0-0 was a poor result. But they actually they were one of the better teams we played in terms of football. And, in injury time, our keeper made 2 unbelievable saves. And like that's a good point in the end. We could easily have lost that. So I think, it's that balance between sort of expectation and reality. But away from home generally, again, like if you looked at over the last 12 months, we've been pretty good. But like you said, we have hit probably teams with, I guess Wimbledon, Walsall probably have 2 of the better home records, and Colchester had, like I said, they've actually drawn every game. But again, I think they hadn't lost for about 3 months, and we ended up with 10 men in that. So I think probably winning generally, we just haven't quite had enough of, and that's why we haven't quite been able to kick on. But probably, if anything, the home form's been slightly the more concerning of the 2, even though we've picked up at home recently. I think, if we'd have had 2 or 3 more wins at home, which we could easily have had, again, we'd be probably clear in second now. So I'd say it's probably been the lack of home wins that has held us back more than anything.
Yeah, just looking at the home and away tables, you currently sit sixth in the home table, and obviously it's slightly skewed because teams have played different amount of games. But you're eighth in the away table, yeah, and it's only one win in five. But then if you look at it the other way, you've won 5 out of 12, so it was 4 wins in the first 7. So, like you say, it's just a bit up and down. You get the home form sort of peaks and the away form drops off, and then vice versa. Just one point you made there about teams draw a lot of games in this division. We must be the anomaly then, because we've only drawn 3 and we lose too many of them games where we're not great. And they say don't lose it if you can't win it. Well, we've managed to lose far too many of them recently. That's ultimately why I'm not going to try and do a team lineup for this game, because it will be John Coleman's first game in charge. That was meant to be last Saturday, but the frost and the ice put paid to that. So it's a little bit of the unknown for us, even in terms of our own side. Final question, Daniel, and I will give you, I don't know if it's going to sway your prediction, but just looking at the Priestfield games between the two sides since 2014, 10 games, 5 wins for Gills, 4 draws and only 1 win for Doncaster. Gills have scored 14, Donny 9, and we've kept 5 clean sheets to just your 1. So I don't know whether that's going to sway your score prediction, but I'm going to ask regardless. What's the score going to be come, not 5 o'clock, be about 2:30, won't it? Because it's an early kickoff.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, there've been funny games, haven't there, over the years? Like, I think the home team has sort of held sway, but from memory, we've had a lot of the games have been decided by like a single goal. I mean, even in that, like there's only 5 goals in them 10 games, yet I think we did win under Grant McCann that would have been the League One. I think we won,
when you had
was
John
it 3-1
Marquis
over
a couple,
Christmas?
I think. That's it, yeah.
But we've had a lot of, I think it might have been our home games more, but like we've had like 0-0 draws, 3-3 draws. Obviously, we had the 2-2 last year, where obviously the last game of the season where
you were cruising until your keeper got sent off. I'm not going to lie, that would have been about 5 or 6-0 if it weren't for the red card.
Keeper got sent off. Yeah, and then we were hanging on. Then it was like, had we conceded, and I think had Barras scored, we'd have been out of the playoffs. And suddenly it went from, like, I think was it at half time, 4 or 5 goal swing, to hang on. And it looked, I mean, I think we cleared at least 1 off the line. I think the keeper,
there was 1 off the line right at the end from because it was our young lad who's yet to score a goal for us. Yeah, header that got cleared off the line by a defender. Yeah,
and I think the keeper, like who came on because he hadn't played for ages, Louis Jones. I think he saved one that then bounced off someone out. It was like, it just felt like you're going to score, and then it was like, hang on, we're like 1 goal away then. But yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see if we do bring a midfielder in. But we've signed a couple of forwards recently. Rob Street had a really good game on Sunday. He looks more of an out and out forward, but he played out wide, and he put in a real like good defensive shift as well. But like you say, it's an interesting game to predict, because I was hoping you'd have played last week just so you'd have got an idea of what Coleman might do. And equally, McCann might go, right, we had a really good result at Hull, we'll go same again. But he did set up last Sunday a little bit more sort of caution in mind, and he's not a cautious manager at all. So he might actually make more attacking changes. But really, I would say a similar sort of performance to Hull to start with, because I imagine, if nothing else, he'll come sort of flying out the blocks. Because I watched that Bromley game,
I'm not
and obviously
sure.
that looked, you're not sure what to.
I'm sitting here hoping that you come and be open, because we've struggled to break any team that comes in a low block. We cannot break them down. We don't score enough. We don't create enough. We've got, I said to, I think it was the lad on the Fleetwood preview show last week, we've got 5 strikers. They've all scored, but none of them's got more than 2. Like, it's a huge problem still, and it's something that's lasted for season upon season. So I'm hoping you come and be open and be attacking, and don't play a holding midfielder, because it might help us out, because we might have some space to play in. If you come in and say, break us down and we'll play on the counter, I think we get beat.
Yeah, and it would be interesting too, because I actually thought on Sunday, although it obviously wasn't as pleasing on the eye, I think we are more effective when, like I say, at times I know Hull are a totally different team, but we let them have the ball, and we look so like the goal came from left back running forwards, number 10 playing it through, Molyneux running in. Molyneux can't score that sort of goal in League Two, because he either two marking him or someone clatters him, or like their defender pulled out of the challenge in League Two. He'd have been in the stand with the ball, wouldn't he? So yeah, I'm stalling on this prediction, aren't I? I think it feels like like I said earlier, it feels like a winnable game, but equally Saturday lunchtime, new manager, element of the unknown. I don't think any result would surprise me, but I don't think there'll be much in it. I'd like to think we can maybe sort of win 2-1, but like I say, having watched Accrington over the years against us, they're a bit of a bogey side with Coleman in charge, like they were for a lot of teams. So if he's got you sort of coming off the ceiling in that first, if ever people are going to be fired up to put in a performance, it will be that first game. But yeah, I don't know what you think generally. From the outside looking in, it looks a bit of a strange appointment, not because he isn't a good manager, but obviously Mark Bonner seems to be sort of totally the opposite. And I thought if Coleman sort of came back, it might be somewhere like Tranmere or Morecambe, maybe one of them teams at the bottom. One of those northern teams similar to Accrington.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest surprise, I think, from Gills fans' point of view, was the fact that he's come all this way, because he's always been very northern based, hasn't he? I know he went to Ireland for a while, but it was Accrington. I think the only spell in between there was Rochdale in the league for a season. But I think we've just gone, right, we're going right the opposite of what we've been from the last two, which was Stephen Clements, never had a job as a number one. For me, didn't look like a number one. Mark Bonner came with a relatively decent CV, albeit promotion came in a COVID season. It didn't work. He wasn't good enough. We wasn't good enough. So I think we're almost at the point now, because a lot of this squad have seen off three managers. If you add them two plus Neil Harris, there's a large portion that have played under all three. So I'm almost thinking that if John Coleman and Jimmy Bell can't get anything out of this group, because I think it will be slightly more old school in the approach, and I mean that with the most respect to John Coleman as possible, then nobody ever will. So I think that's the reason we've gone down that route. You've completely swerved the score prediction, so I'm not going to let you go until you say a score. Or did you say 2-1? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I
can't remember now.
I was going to say, sort of a one each feels about right, but you obviously haven't drawn that many games. I don't know if Coleman might sort of change that theory, but I mean, we played Fleetwood twice recently, and I mean, we played at Fleetwood in like horrendous conditions, and I was actually quite impressed. I mean, they tried to play football, and I mean, I thought it was totally the wrong tactics, and it played into our hands. But I thought if you can actually play football on a night like that, maybe Charlie Adam would turn it around. But then a couple of weeks later, we had that. It was the quick rematch game, and then Pete Wild was there, and obviously we had a totally different sort of opposition. They played totally different. And again, it was like, I was hoping Charlie Adam would just hold on a game or two more, because I think that might have been his last game. Do you know what I mean? Like, obviously, I watched your game against Bromley, thinking we're going to have Fleetwood Mark II here, because I thought he'd probably get one more game, but you got postponed, didn't you? Like you said.
Yeah.
But I thought there's every chance you'd probably get beat at Chesterfield the way you were going, and that would probably be the end of. But they sacked him regardless, didn't they? So
yeah, he went that night after the postponement. Yeah, so that's what I mean. It's completely unknown. I don't know what system we're going to play. I don't know what style we're going to play. I've written down 1-0, but that's purely on the hope that we get a new manager bounce and that we kept a few clean sheets against you lot at Priestfield in the last few years. But if Doncaster win, it wouldn't surprise me, because I've watched us be very, very poor in the last 3 games, and John Coleman's not a magician at the end of the day. He's a very good football manager, but if the players aren't up to it, then the players aren't up to it. That's the issue.
It is weird though, like you say, isn't it? There are some grounds where, like Walsall have been a bogey team for us over the years, and that's usually when they're not very good. So like when we went there on Boxing Day, I don't know why, but you're going there thinking we've come here when they're awful, and we seem to lose. So it's almost, there are some grounds where, like you say, our record isn't great, is it, at Gillingham? But having said that, like you said, we always seem to have sort of, we've kind of been similar, haven't we? We've kind of gone up and down together and had a lot of those. Like we've won the last few at home, haven't we? Like 1-0 or 2-1, and then we probably lost 1-0 and 2-1.
Yeah, I think the only game that I can remember being comfortable for either side was the cup game at our place under when it was just before COVID got shut down. I think we won 3-0, but aside from that, like you say, it's odd goal here and there all the time.
I remember coming that last game thinking it is one of them, because we'd been on that winning run as well, haven't we? And in the end, the draw was enough for us. But I remember thinking it is a ground we haven't done that well on. And even that day, like you say, at half time, I think my dad was out. My dad messaged me, and I think he put like the jinx on it. And I was like, it's unlike me, but I'm like, honestly, not only are we winning, Gillingham look like they're, on the beach, and we look totally like I'm never relaxed at a game, but I actually thought if ever we're gonna win a game to get in, and then like you say, I remember messaging him, goal has been sent off, 2-1, 2 each, and he's like, I think he thought I was joking. I'm like, I remember messaging him saying we're definitely going to lose this, because it was like we didn't like the game. Sort of, I think we did towards the end, but for about 10 minutes, we looked like we were just all over the place, right? I mean, the ball kept getting chucked into the box, and it was like one of these is going to go in. But yeah, I mean, it's weird to think since that game you've had. Obviously, that was Clemence's last game, wasn't it? Thinking back,
yeah, it was final day of the season, and he was relieved of his duties a few days later. Yeah,
I think both teams have. No, that's it. Like both teams feel like. I mean, we have played higher up, haven't we? But you're just searching for that. I think we've got it in McCann, but you're still looking for that manager that consistently can just. I'm slightly surprised. Sort of Neil Harris left. Really, I thought he'd probably. But I think in the modern game, you don't get time, do you? And if it turns, and you can't quite get out of it, a change. Yeah, suddenly, I remember when that first game was very close, wasn't it? And Bonner afterwards I think he was quite critical of you. And I remember watching, thinking, you could easily have. I think you didn't have loads and loads of shots, but it was like you could easily have got a result. I think it was your first defeat. And
yeah, we lost there, and then we won 3 on the bounce after that to 0, and we beat top of the league twice, and the sun was out, and it was lovely being a Gills fan. And then since then, we've won 3 out of 15, unfortunately, and that's why Mark's now unemployed, sadly. But we start again on Saturday with John Coleman, and the hope comes back at least for 20 minutes potentially until we go 1-0 down. And fingers crossed we can kick on and have a similar second half to the season that you had last time around, Dan. Been a pleasure, mate. Really enjoyed chatting to you. Thank you very much. Like I say to everybody who's been watching, I do appreciate it all the time. Please keep clicking like. Please keep hitting that subscribe button. Daniel's details are in the description, so go and give him a follow. Myself and Ava and Stocky and the gang will be at Priestfield for the early kickoff on Saturday, so come and say hi for the match day live. And then myself and Reese will be back Sunday morning, to hopefully review a decent Gillingham performance and a positive result. But until then, thanks again to Dan, and most importantly, up the Gills.